All right, let's move to the UDFAs, and it's always worth reminding that just because you don't get drafted, like that doesn't mean your career's over. It's never going to take off. And one of the things about being a UDFA is that you make the negotiation with a team. You're choosing. You're searching out where's the best fit. And I think the UDFAs for USC, they all found good fits. They all found franchises where I can look at that and say, hey, there's a possibility that they could stick on the roster. Ethan, the UDFAs you're most excited about after the draft?
I think that there's a few that stick out to me. I think I'll bring up John Humphrey and Greedy Vance just because they're going to Vegas with Pete Carroll. I think that anytime you see a Trojan connection, that's really exciting. So I'd hope that they can break through with him and kind of get that old school USC experience and see what it's like to play under him. I think it's also good to see Easton Mascarenas Arnold find a home just because he was so integral to our defense last year and had, led the team with 95 tackles. I think the guy I'm most excited for personally is Eddie Czaplicki, just because, he was the nation's best punter last year, Ray Guy Award winner, which he was USC's first Ray Guy Award winner, and the second first-team All-American, after Tom Malone in 2003. And so, we'll be seeing him on that Wall of Fame later this year probably. But he was just a guy for me personally that made punting exciting, which I know I'm coping really hard because we had our offensive struggles last year and I had to find something to get excited about. But he was a guy who, made a typically very boring and very frustrating play kind of exciting for Trojan fans. I think I saw that he had 25 punts that pins opponents inside the 20 and then 10 inside the 10 and 4 inside the 5. So anytime that he stepped up to, punt the ball, you knew you could be seeing one of the most beautiful punts you've ever seen. And so he was a guy that kind of helped me appreciate the art of punting a little bit more than I did initially. I subscribe to Isaac Punts here on YouTube now after, watching Eddie play. And so I'll be excited to see him kind of try his hand. He's going into a situation in Kansas City where they already have a guy, it's Matt Areza, who obviously had an incredible college career, was kind of a generational talent at the punting position, but then had all of those allegations, was out of the NFL for a couple of years, now is back in the NFL. So there's not a clear path to start, but he is the best punter in the country. And I think that if he's cut, he's going to have opportunities elsewhere. So I'm excited to see what happens in Kansas City. I don't think that it's entirely out of the question for him to end up there. And I don't think that, but I also think that if he doesn't end up there, he'll have opportunities elsewhere. And yeah, I think one story in particular that kind of really endeared him to me is, I'm not 100% sure what game this was, so don't quote it on me, but my educated guess is that it was against Notre Dame because I remember it being pretty late in the season. But there was a play where he punted and it was down like inside the 5, close to the end zone, but it was called back. And then he punted again, and it was a perfectly good punt. I think it was down inside the 20, but he spiked his helmet in frustration. He was so mad. And I was like, that's a punt that 90% of punters in the country would be thrilled with, especially because he'd gotten a 15-yard penalty the play before. And I was like, a guy who is kind of that much of a perfectionist and that much of a competitor that he wants to put the ball inside the 5 every time and got that frustrated for 10 yards of field position difference. That's the guy I want as the punter on my team. So he's electric, at a position where there's not too many electric players. I personally think he's electric, and I'm excited to see what he does.
Yeah, you know what? I think that offers some insight into why he negotiated a UDFA deal with the Chiefs. He wants to test himself against the best. He wants to be surrounded by a winning culture. He might not stick on that Chiefs roster, but just having that experience, being in Camp Kansas City, that probably is going to serve him well. Let's not go right to the Cleveland Browns. Let that not be your first NFL stop. Let's just smell the air of a winner, of a champion first. Go to Kansas City, just absorb that, and he's gonna find a landing spot, right? He's just way too good not to. So it seems to be the philosophy was not, can I stick on this roster? It's just, hey, let me be exposed to the right NFL culture so that when I get kicked, if I get kicked to another org, I can bring that culture to the new team that I'm joining. So that like the perfectionist mindset that you accurately noted with Sablichki, like that seems to be explain the motivation, the reasoning in his thought process for why he would go to the Chiefs. Jamil Muhammad, Los Angeles Rams. Now, that's another, to me, a great fit, because when you think of the Rams, you think of defensive line, and obviously Coach Henne is no longer there. Eric Henderson's no longer there, but nevertheless, like when you think about the Rams over the past decade, you think of Cooper Kupp, but of course he's now in Seattle with the Seahawks. And you might think of a few other offensive players, but in terms of a position group that the Rams have made the best and have set the gold standard, it's defensive line. It's getting after that quarterback. So Jamil Muhammad, if you're going to the Rams to be a pass rusher, like Sablichki wanting to be a punter on the Chiefs, you want to be the best. You want to be among the best. You want to be surrounded by the best. You want to be surrounded by winning excellence. That seems to be the thought process there. I'm really excited about Jamil Muhammad. And of course, he gets to stay in LA. He doesn't have to pack his bags and relocate as well. So that's a nice little bonus, kind of like Tuli Tuipulotu making it with the Chargers. He didn't have to leave town.